thank you so much for that introduction, and I just want to say it's an honor to be here to celebrate mHUB's one-year anniversary. It's been really fun to watch the growth and to see the incredible amount of people here and everything that mHUB has done to contribute to the city and the innovation community. So congratulations to you. And we have such a terrific panel today. No question that consumer IoT is big business. I've seen a lot of different statistics being thrown around, but I'll just pick one for the sake of our discussion today, which is that Business Insider projects there'll be more than 55 billion IoT devices by 2025, and that's up from about 9 billion last year. And there's a forecast as well that there'll be $15 trillion in IoT investment between 2017 and 2025, and no question that those numbers are accelerating every day. So I think what I'd like to do is start by having you all set the stage about what you do and maybe the biggest issue facing your company now when it comes to IoT for Mark, and obviously for Lisa being a startup, and then if you could just talk about where things stand at mHUB with consumer IoT. So I'll have you begin, Manas.
Great. Again, my name is Mehandru, so I'm the COO here at mHUB, immersed really in IoT just about every day. I'd say probably about a third to half of our members here are in that area. And so we see the ups and downs, the struggles, again, every day. Before coming to mHUB, I actually was a business development over at Underwriters Laboratories, where I managed IoT for appliances, HVAC, and lighting. So I saw a perspective from that industry as well.
Okay, and I'm Mark Karasek. I'm the lead executive at Chamberlain for new product development and innovation. Chamberlain is world's largest producer of garage door openers, commercial door openers, and gate operators. We're in perimeter access and safety and security products. And the biggest challenge for us around IoT has been the transformation of the business from being a durables manufacturer, consumer and commercial durables manufacturer, to being a connected ecosystem player. And so everything changes in your business, from the way you interact with customers and end users, the way your brand is perceived, the way you develop products, business model innovation, all these things, the way you get paid, all these things are evolving. And so our biggest challenge is to keep up with that, right? And figure out how to be as successful in the new ecosystem environment and space as we were when we were winning in the product space.
Thanks. I'm Lisa. I'm the co-founder and chief sales officer at Proxfinity, where we are manufacturing smart badges that help people find people that share interests at meetings. I would say that two challenges really being IoT. Our first challenge when we started this company was really finding people that could help us work on the hardware side and software that knew both sides of that business, where you could now have a device that actually not only does something on its own, but that also has data on it that you can pull off and do a lot with. And so finding people that understood that we could work with and help us make actionable insights out of what we were doing was a challenge. That now all of a sudden time is right for this, and there are tons of people out there that we can work with, and it's awesome timing. But also in creating something that is a new category that wasn't there before. We're not reinventing something that is out there and making it better. We're completely introducing something new. And so educating consumers on what that means for them is a challenge as well.
Absolutely. Mark, you raised an issue that I was going to ask already, which has obviously been a company that's been around a long time, and just transitioning must be a big challenge. I will say this, that you've definitely saved my marriage, because I leave the garage door open a lot, and I do use your app. So I want to thank you personally for that.
Thank you for using our app.
But I want to ask, and I'll have all three of you weigh in on this, where do you think that consumers are finding the most value? Because there are a lot of different things available. Obviously, smart home is probably one of the most popular applications, but I would like you all to talk about that. Where do you think people are finding the most value in consumer IoT?
I kind of want to go last on this, and I'm curious what you guys think.
So from my perspective, I think it's a real challenge. In the home particularly, there's a lot of things that we can connect, but should we connect them? Are we really creating value, and are we really solving a problem? And so, connected products bring a whole set of challenges with them for manufacturers, but also for end users. So if you think about connected speakers, right? We think about connected speakers, and we talk about them as being voice activated. And they aren't voice activated, they're speech activated. So the convenience we're getting by being able to talk to this device and get information from it without typing a question comes at a cost of security. So anybody can walk up to your device and talk to it today. Those devices aren't really secure, they're speech recognition. Now all those companies are looking at voice and want to move to true voice, but they have a problem with false positives and false negatives in balancing the false positives and false negatives. So there's a whole lot of things that you have to really think about whether you want to connect them or not, and whether you trust the people who are connecting them for you.
Well, we're definitely going to talk a lot about privacy later in the discussion, but I'll have Manas weigh in a little bit on that.
So it's interesting. So I spent most of my career at UL, where I actually helped develop the cybersecurity standards to kind of address these things, and most of my customer base were large manufacturers that have a brand to protect. But now I'm starting to buy entrepreneurs that frankly don't have a brand to protect. They can be more risk-taking, risk-seeking, and security is not a concern. But we'll see what the market says, right? Generally, my opinion is a lot of it is just cool factor. It's kind of fun. I have no reason to be able to turn on and off my phone, or turn on and off my lights with my phone. I can stand up and hit a switch. It's not a real problem for me, but I do. And I've got a 6-year-old son that will tell our Alexa to turn on and off the lights if we go unlock the door and do everything else that he probably shouldn't be able to do. And so from a value standpoint, it's fun, it's cool, it's reasonably priced. I think that'll change significantly over time. You put out a number for 2025. I think there's a point where there is real value, and if you've got enough things, you're essentially outsourcing like your mundane details of your life, and you can focus in on other things, right? One example I know when I was at UL was Nest, the Nest thermostat. A lot of people have. There's also a Nest fire detector. And I think it's Nest. And so two very different products. What you realized is if there's a fire alarm, you don't want your thermostat exhausting air all through the house, right? And so that's where, okay, you can think about this, take it for granted, but you can shut down the HVAC system so the fire doesn't spread without even having to think about it. And so there's ways when you actually start really connecting devices, exponentially gets much more valuable, right? But the adoption takes time. So you start with light bulbs, you start with a thermostat, you start with a garage door, and then you go from there.
Absolutely. Lisa, do you want to weigh in a little bit?
So, I can't remember what the question was.
Basically, where are people finding the most value?
Yeah, I think that people are starting to understand how IoT can work for them, and we're getting to the point where, when IoT was starting out, or when these, applications were coming out, they were hard to understand, hard to manage. There was a huge learning curve for the end user, and so it's almost like, well, I'm not getting enough out of this to spend time learning it, but now things are easier, they're used to it. I know that in our space, in the event space, people are actually looking at IoT and saying, like, we want more out of this experience. If we're going to come to events, spend resources to attend, we want more than just an app where we can look in there and see who's there and try to message them. We want an experience, we want to have assured connection, and we want to meet the right people, and so IoT and our devices are giving them that experience that they're looking for, and now that they're ready to adopt.
So we had a big acquisition in this space last week with Amazon buying Ring, and I think it's a good place to talk about, obviously investment in this industry, and also this notion that there's so much consolidation. How will that impact some of the privacy and security concerns that you've touched on a little bit? So I'm curious what you think of that acquisition and whether you think we'll see more like it, and then we maybe can move into the privacy and security aspects of it.
Yes, that was a big one. That was, another one over $1 billion. Amazon, Google, Apple are massive in this, right? And I think there's a lot of other players that are inventing on their own, largely creating this network, right? Because the more devices you get on it, the more value it is. I think we will see more. And And I think it's gonna start out kind of the home side of things, right? The doorbell, access control, like getting into your home and then you're doing basic things. But I think, yeah, I mean, I think it'll evolve to things that, in theory, people are more secure about. Because then you get more and more comfortable with technology, and then it'll probably start to accelerate in the next 3 to 5 years.
Mark?
Oh, I'm sorry.
So, yeah, I think that, Ring was a big one, right? I think there will be more of that consolidation. I think that you're starting to see Apple, Google, and Amazon start to build their ecosystems out, whereas they've started everything connecting to everything. I think what we're seeing is those companies are starting to realize, well, maybe we want some stuff that just connects to us, right? And start to compete with each other from an ecosystem perspective. That's one thing that may be going on or may start happening. The other thing is that the problems, what does Ring bring to Amazon, right? Amazon doesn't need a doorbell, right? They need awareness of what's going on at the door. And that's probably more what Ring brought to Amazon than a doorbell. Walking around CES this year, there were 50 knockoffs of Ring all over the place, right? So it's not about the doorbell, it's something else. Amazon, Google, Apple, they're lining up to really compete with each other around solving these big problems. Amazon is already trying to solve the delivery problem, right? They're trying to solve the access problem to the home. And so, as they start collecting kind of businesses and acquiring, I think what you'll see is we'll start to understand some of the big problems they're trying to solve. And we probably don't understand all those problems right now, but they do. And I think they all have a long-term plan of what they're trying to put together.
In addition to, solving problems, there are, of course, these concerns about now Amazon and Google knowing when I walk in the door, when I turn my lights off, when I go to bed, all of those questions. I mean, what are the implications of that in the long term?
Well, I think that's gonna be a real challenge over the next few years. I think people are becoming more aware of that. Up till now, companies have been pretty free to collect that data and use it however they'd like. I think that's going to change. You're already seeing it in Europe, right? Europe has new rules that are going into effect that are pretty restrictive and are going to be a real challenge for the IoT industry, particularly about information, where it's stored, what companies are able to do with it, and making permission much more explicit. I think that's going to come to the U.S. too.
So I'm a little less concerned about security, I think just by nature, but these things add a lot of value. I mean, I'll give a little pitch for Lisa's product. It's one of my favorites because I did business development for years at UL, and I would go to these giant conventions. And when I first started, it was ridiculous. I didn't know where to go. I didn't know who to talk to. They thought that someone could be wearing a badge, and I can instantaneously walk down a hallway, not walk by 100 people, and be like, "Hey, these are the most people I'm going to talk to." I could be 10 times more effective in my role in half the time. Right? And so if I'm willing to give up some information about who I like to talk to and what I talk about, I don't care. If I'm going to be 10 times more effective in my role, yeah, in a heartbeat. And then I trust the organizations to retain that information. Worst case, it gets leaked or it gets hacked, but I'm not hurting, right? And so if someone wants to hack my light bulbs, not concerned. If someone wants to hack in my garage, I'm concerned.
Well, that's the important point, right? There are layers here, right?
Yeah.
And that's what's really going to be the challenge is people are willing to, we've gotten a lot of pressure to link to Alexa with our garage door opener. And we've talked to the Alexa folks, and they really think about digital security. They don't think about physical security. Physical security is different than digital security. And so, the idea that you could use a subsonic signal and Alexa will listen to it, your speaker will listen to it and open the door, well, that's not a good thing, right? And so there's levels of security that have to come in still before those systems are really well designed for all the use cases that they want to use them for. So I think it's going to be in layers, right? There's going to be value created. There's also going to be segments, market segments, right? There are going to be segments, Manus, that are totally on the other end of the spectrum from you. Just look at how unsuccessful Key has been. Key, most people respond to the concept of Amazon Key and say it's really creepy. No, I'm not going to let you walk in. And if you look at the videos of somebody delivery person using Amazon Key, it's really funny because they open the door just a tiny bit, they slide their hand in, they shove that box in, and they close it as fast as they can because they don't want to be in that house. It's the last thing that delivery person wants to do, right?
Right.
So it's a challenge, but...
Yeah, well, Manus, you brought up something that I want to ask Lisa about because, at the same time that there might be privacy concerns over something like Ring also kind of builds a sense of community because of the news alerts they give, like, I just got a package stolen from my front door, where was it? And there's this whole dialogue that takes place. And that's kind of similar to what's behind your business because you're creating connections, right?
Well, and I think that if people understand, I think the scary part about people taking in all of your data is not understanding what are they doing with my data? So like, I'm leaving the house, I'm going to a meeting, they're tracking me, but if you know why and there's something in it, saying, hey, I'm getting ready to leave in 10 minutes, Ubers are circling around my door, I'm going to get picked up faster, like, I'm happy to share that data. And with Proxfinity, with the meeting space, we haven't yet had a problem acquiring people's interests, what their goals are for attending the meeting, because people are getting something out of it. They get it. It's understandable, it's clear. We're not taking this data to sell it to someone else and do something else with it yet. But they get it, and so they're more happy to give it out because they're getting something direct, and it's saving them time, it's saving them energy, and it makes sense.
We've talked a lot about efficiency, but when we were talking ahead of time, we also talked about that maybe we like the time we're getting back. I know you talked about this on the phone, but we don't necessarily want an alert from our refrigerator every 2 minutes coming onto our phone. So are there still some sort of kinks to be worked out as to the connected home and what information we need to get from it? I would probably want an alert from my washing machine telling me that I need a repair before it breaks. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Right, yeah, I said on a panel a couple years ago, and someone basically didn't like the way Samsung and a bunch of appliances were kind of explaining their product, right? Your milk goes bad, you get an email. He's like, look guys, if I'm getting emails saying my milk is expired, like this is just going to annoy the heck out of me. Like I get 1,000 emails a day, I don't need more. And I think it's an adoption curve. Again, you learn the preferences of users over time. They're actually collecting that, which is a good collection of that data to make the product better. So instead, it'll just order the milk for you. So you don't need to know, right? And so the purpose of innovation largely is to make our lives better. And you make your life better by taking out those mundane details, automating them, so you can focus on what matters, right? So you can focus on your kids, your family, your friends. You go home and just things are ready you can think about, maybe meal plans for you. Not just necessarily offering suggestions, but it just learns your behavior and does it for you. And so there's a huge learning curve to get there. It's kind of far out there, but basically the way the pace is going,
it's like the Internet of People, not the Internet of Things anymore.
Absolutely. It's not only just sending you data, it's just going ahead and aggregating and making a decision for you so you don't have to. Again, the garage door, for example. You could set it to automatically send you an email, I think, if it's been open for 3 years, for 3 minutes. Or if it's open for 3 minutes, just shut it.
In my case, I need the less than 3 minutes, and it pops right up. So it's, it's really fantastic.
So at that point, you trust it. If it's been 3 minutes, it knows what it's doing, just close it, don't even bother letting you know. And that's where it needs to go. And I think that's when you really start to see the adoption just take off, is if it just works on its own and you can focus on some other more fun things.
What do you think the implications are on the service industry because of consumer IoT? Do you think that it's enabling it and helping it to grow as well? Because, for example, you would know ahead of time that you needed a repair or in one case or something like that. What do you think about that? Anyone want to weigh in?
I think it's going to disrupt a lot of service businesses. Again, what we're seeing is product companies are wrapping services around their products, and service companies are productizing, right? So value is flowing from products or services to ecosystems. And so if you're in a service business, you better understand what ecosystem you're going to be a part of and how the profit pool is going to redistribute in that ecosystem. Because when you have disruption like that, profit pools tend to move around, right? Your permission to make money changes as a business. And so I think there's going to be a lot of value created for end users, but I also think there's going to be a lot of disruption in companies, both service and product companies.
Lisa, do you want to weigh in on that a little bit?
Well, I think that, on service, if you're not tech forward now as a service provider, it's like almost you have to learn and stay, kind of understand where this market is going. And so thinking about people that do the repairs, if you can get on an app that someone has hooked up to their machine and now all of a sudden you're first in line to make that repair, you may not have to go through a big store anymore. You might not have to be contracted through Best Buy or app to do the repair. You can now not have to take out part of your service fee to give back to the company. And so the more you can understand technology, I guess as you said, it opens the doors to how you make money and who can be in part of that.
And just connecting it back, investing is more interesting too then, right? Because if the revenue model is a lot clearer, if your customer acquisition costs go down because you've got a customer and you have revenue from them kind of going forward, it'll help kind of spread innovation, which will help adoption.
Sure.
I think the biggest risk is that there's some big companies that want to come and take away the services revenue, right? And Amazon is, again, they've got their Amazon Home Services, and so in a typical value stream, you've got the customer is owned by the installer or the service provider, right? And they take payment, they do all this. Well, Amazon's kind of stepping in the middle and taking all the value relationships in that value stream. And they're leaving the commodity installation or repair to the people who are doing it today. And so one of the challenges is there's new competitors coming into your space, and they're big.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about, the product innovation, and Lisa, maybe you can start with this question, which is, what are some of the biggest challenges that you had in building out your product? And if you could talk a little bit about the challenge and maybe what your biggest hurdle is, you think, going forward now.
The first hurdle we had was, building a hardware device to do something that a lot of people are trying to do in an app. And everyone's saying, you guys are crazy, and so up against all of that and saying no, but this is how it's going to go, software isn't enough. And so kind of getting through all of those hurdles and those people telling you those things and persevering anyway. And then also, deciding how you're going to build it and getting people to adopt. That's a challenge. This is something new. This is hard to teach people. How do you onboard participants and users? How do you educate the people that are actually buying it for those end users? And so it's a ton of trial and error. Hey, let's try and position it this way, see what works, try another, until we get it right. And it did. It took a lot of practice and a lot of kind of, let's try it now this way. This worked really well. Let's try to get another, until we got it down where we were like, okay, now we can tell people in 20 seconds and it makes sense.
Mark, you want to talk about your app?
Yeah, so the biggest challenge for us was managing the scaling of the service. So we could build it pretty easily, prototype it, build it, get it out there. The real challenge came as the user base started growing and just keeping up with that user base, building that capacity in a reliable way. One of the particular challenges we have that's a little different than some other companies is we know that when a user stands in front of a garage door with a transmitter, they press that transmitter button, and that door has to start moving in a couple hundred milliseconds or they think it's broken. And they start pressing the button. We actually make the transmitter ignore that.
I've never done that, so.
Yeah. So when they stand in front of their garage door with their phone and they have our app and they touch the little picture of the garage door, they think the same thing's going to happen. And they don't care that the phone is talking to a cell tower, which is talking to a series of servers, and then your router, and then the device, right? They don't care. They just know that when they touch the button, the door starts moving, right? And so we had to really worry about latency. And as our user base was growing, latency was really a challenge. So the whole infrastructure was a real challenge. And we had a ton of service providers who were startups and little service providers that wanted to get our business, but none of them could handle the specifics of making our experience good. So that was the biggest challenge for us as we were trying to grow in the space.
Manus, do you want to weigh in on that a little bit?
No, I just thought that was a great story. Because I've seen people with broken buttons, and I know why, and that makes a lot of sense. I expected it open right away.
Yeah, for sure. I've made the call of, why isn't my app working? But it is. It just takes a minute. And Lisa, I know both you and Mark talked to me before the panel about getting that feedback and how important that is. Can you talk a little bit about, how you have to kind of balance building out and moving forward with your product while also making sure that you're giving people what they want?
Yeah, I'd say that when you're starting a company, everyone tells you, don't wait for perfect. 80% is good enough, and don't overdevelop before you prove it out and see if you're even building something that people want. And so in theory, that sounds great. In actuality, it's really hard to say, okay, we're going to release this. Someone has paid for it, and we don't know if it's perfect. It's hard to do, but you kind of have to do it, and you have to then accept feedback openly so that your next event, your next iteration, you're building what your consumer actually really wants, and that's something that's actually very beautiful and well built, but no one's actually going to use it. And so we've experienced that a lot in building this product. We're actually about to release a new feature because it's something that our clients have requested. A lot of people will like the garage door. It's totally different, but they want to match. They're wearing this badge, they want it to light up, and they will harp on this button that does nothing to try to get it to work and match, if they're not near someone. And so it's interesting to hear that feedback, and if, we wouldn't have built this feature to have this button make a match if we hadn't gotten all of that feedback from the participants. There's also a lot of stuff that we thought about building that no one actually really wanted, and we're thrilled that we didn't build it all, because it's expensive and it takes a lot of time. So I think getting that feedback early and often is key, even though sometimes it's hard to do.
So I'll say, I think it's actually an advantage for physical products. So in the software world, if you just have a digital app, you can respond and react to customers very, very quickly, and you almost have to, because that's the landscape for everybody. Not always a good idea. One voice out of 100 customers or 100,000 customers isn't necessarily a good indicator of what you really need to do. And so in the physical product world, no one can respond overnight. You need a redesign. It takes a lot more time. There's some software components that the features you could add, but you don't want to be overreactive. And the nice thing is you aren't surrounded by other people who are trying to undercut you. There's more patience that's required. I think that just forces a little more discipline. Still challenges, but I think less so than kind of software digital-based companies.
I think for us, the big challenge on the relationship with the customer was that our relationship became much more intimate with the end user. So we talked, as a consumer durable, we were talking at customers continuously, and they were listening every 12 to 15 years when they were ready for a new garage door opener, okay? Now we're talking with them daily through our MyQ community. That's not all of them, but it's a big number. We're also getting a lot more feedback than we used to get. It's interesting, a consumer who buys a garage door opener and doesn't connect it or doesn't buy it for connectivity, they might rate it on the site, where they purchased it, or go online to rate it, but not so much, right? It's unusual. Somebody who buys it for the connectivity and cares about connectivity, they want to get online and talk about it, whether they like it or they don't like it. And that's a much more intimate relationship with the end user. It's wonderful, right? We get a lot of feedback that used to take a lot longer to get, but it's also terrifying at times because we get a lot more feedback than we used to get, and we have to figure out what to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
They also know who you are, right? So, I would imagine 10 years ago, no one knew who made the garage door opener. A lot of people didn't. People at MyIQ know that you got Chamberlain's MyIQ, which is great for your brand. You had someone literally clicking on your brand on your phone every day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The value of that alone is huge for marketing value. But then there's risk, right? Because if it doesn't work right, the stakes are just raised.
Mark, can you talk a little bit about the company's internal process of, it's been around for half a century or more, of the process of moving to this? Was there a lot of resistance? I'm curious about how long it took and what the internal dynamics were.
Sure. So was there a lot of resistance? Yes. The reason we developed a connected garage door opener came from ethnographic research that we did. We didn't do it to get involved in IoT. It was well before anybody was talking about IoT. It was the early 2000s. We filed some of our early IP in 2002, 2003. And we built our first prototypes back then. So we got into it because what we heard and what we observed in our ethnographic research is people said, you know, I drive away in the morning, it's become so automatic to press that button, I don't remember if I pressed it. And so once a week, once a month, twice a month, whatever, I have to go around the block and see if the door closed or not, right? Or I have to call my spouse or call my neighbor. That's what the problem we were trying to solve, all right? That's what we were trying to do. It just turned out that connectivity was the best way to do that. And so there was a lot of discomfort internally because we were a product company. We created that technology or this capability in the early 2000s. We commercialized in 2011, the end of 2011. And the only reason we commercialized is we got a new CEO. The new CEO came in and we demonstrated the capability, and he was like, oh my God, we have to take this to market. What do you mean you haven't taken it to market? Let's go, come on.
I'm sure the smartphone also helped the case as well, right?
Well, it did, but we anticipated that. I mean, it was easy to see that was coming, right? So yeah, I mean, we started out, you could have done it through push notifications, we could have done it through text messages, emails, lots of ways to give the status update, and but the smartphone certainly enables it.
We talked a lot about smart home in this conversation, but I'm curious where you see the next wave of investment coming from and where you see these kinds of applications, if there are any other industries that are going to really take off in the coming year.
So,
or 2 or 3.
I mean, so right now, there's certainly some applications on the commercial side of things, right? So I don't necessarily care too much about all the data that I'm getting at home when my lights are turning on and off. I care more about this building because the stakes are higher, right? So if I'm managing this building, I want to know, I want to time the lights. So commercial applications, I think the adoption will happen first, so it'll just be a little bit different. I think there will be opportunities in business where teams will start adopting this, and again, Lisa's product is a good example of, a sales team may decide, hey, this just makes my organization more effective, and so then they're advocates to great organizations that demand it. But I think it's going to be kind of more job-related at first, and we'll find it trickling. If you use it all day at work, like, hey, you start thinking about how this is going to impact you at home, and it comes back there. I think it's a while personally for appliances. There are applications where people will like it. So the one example I thought made a lot of sense is there's a lot of, I forget the name of the term, but there's a lot of people who have elderly parents at home living alone. Yeah, and so you want
safety.
Senior safety, right? So you want to make sure that your mother is still eating lunch every day, and so you can check to see, hey, has the microwave been used? Whether no appliances have been used for a week, like, oh, geez. And so there's applications, or they're turning the oven on for way too long, or the microwave was on for like 80 minutes, whatever it may be. You'd be surprised at things that happen out there. So there's some applications, but it's going to, I still don't know who's going to be adopting it. It's going to be kind of all over the board.
So I think the commercial side is going to move fast. I think it's behind the residential applications today a little bit, but I think there's going to be a lot of adoption of IoT in the commercial space, and it's going to create a lot of value. Example that we've pursued, we have for commercial door operators, this is a garage door opener that opens a dock door, large warehouse door. In California, we've qualified for energy credits. So if a building puts our automation system on their dock doors with the connectivity aspect, the networking aspect, they can get $2,000 per door energy credit for installing that. That's a big deal. We were able to get that because when those doors are connected, suddenly the facility manager has more information about whether the door is open or closed. And so they can control the environment better. They can prevent shrinkage better. So there's all kinds of applications that I think in the B2B space, companies are just starting to recognize that value, and I think that's going to accelerate quickly.
You do take functionality for granted, though. So this building, is a massive building, state-of-the-art, of course, and so we've got smart lights everywhere. There was a good week, probably about a year ago, I had no control over the lights. They would turn on and off randomly, and it took me about a week to realize we had so many people on the network that was also connected to the lighting system that there was interference with lubricant sensors. I would hit light switches, just like event space, like leave the light on, and it would for 2 minutes, and 3 minutes later it would turn off, and then turn back on, and I'm like, I just wanted to switch. But I think I'd never get another smart switch again, but now I've got them at home, so after a while you figure it out. And you'll let it.
Okay. Lisa, do you want to?
I see that, this is my hope also, is that where this space is going is in terms of energy consumption, and that as we get really smart about how buildings are using energy, how people are using energy, that we can really start cutting resources and saving companies money and saving the environment. So I think that is really the future of where it's going. It might be frustrating, like all new tech is, where the lights are going on and off, but once you nail it, that there will be big benefits.
I want to talk a little bit more about security and privacy, and Lisa, maybe you can start us off here. What have been some of the concerns that some of your customers in the early stages have expressed to you about that, and what types of things are you doing to address those concerns?
So going back a little bit to what I said previously, when you make decisions for people without educating them on what you're doing with it, it's scary, it's overwhelming. And so what we've done is say, we're asking you these questions. They're optional, they're here to benefit you, and we're also giving you the opportunity to effortlessly exchange information, but we're not making that decision for the people. We're letting them decide how much of my information do I want to exchange once I do have a relevant contact that I make. Do I want to just give them my initials, my email, my company, my cell phone, however much my business card would hold. And so by giving the end user the ability to make that decision, we're taking out the fear of us taking that data and what's happening with it. So really giving control back.
Mark?
So I've talked a little bit about security already. I think for us, there's a lot of layers to security. We worry a lot about the fact that we're an attractive target. I think any hacker would really love to be the one that opens 100,000 garage doors across the country, or 1 million garage doors, just for the fun of it, right? So we worry
In
a
the
lot
city of
about,
Chicago, right?
Yeah, so we worry a lot about that aspect of security, and we work with outside consultants on security of our system. So that's one whole level. But there's another level that's controlled by the end user, and I talked about that earlier. If you connect if we allowed you to connect your Alexa speaker to your garage door, would you necessarily understand the security risk that you are taking by doing that? We have a lot of companies who would like us to participate in their ecosystems, and they would like it to be an open sandbox. And the problem for us with that is that your garage door is the largest moving device in your home. Before 1993, before we had safety beams at the bottom of the door, which became federal law in 1993, we worked hard as a company to get the laws changed that required safety systems. When you get now to a garage door and you can move it remotely, if you can be in Australia and decide to close your garage door, well, how do you know who's in the way of that garage door, who's playing in the driveway, all these things, right? So we worry a lot about the implications of that, and we don't expect that end users are going to understand all those implications. We get some feedback that people don't like the fact that when one of our garage door openers closes the door and you're not around, so the 3-minute closing, it has to beep and flash, so that people are aware the door is going to move, right? There has to be an audible
Loss. Now, the biggest issue, I'd say, from a security standpoint that I saw was a thermostat. Early on, you could tell when someone's home or not. So it's a good way to kind of say, hey, all these people are gone, these are the houses to break into, and that's potentially risky information. People are sensitive to it, whether or not things happen or not.
Sure. Lisa, I'm wondering if you could give some advice, since I'm sure there are some fellow entrepreneurs in the audience here, about what would you say is the biggest lesson that you've learned so far, and if you had to do it all over again, what might you do differently?
Baby, this is hard work. I would say, it definitely takes longer than you might think it's going to. The ups and downs are real, but the ups are worth it, absolutely. And I think that I would say, get feedback on your idea, solve a real problem, and if it is something that's worth solving, definitely dedicate yourself to. If it's not, don't be afraid to pivot and make a change. The time that you spent researching it, learning it, making a move in that industry isn't, even if it doesn't work the first time, it's not wasted. You absolutely learn something, and it'll make your second idea even better.
Mark, do you want to impart any advice to entrepreneurs in the audience?
Yeah, I think Lisa touched on it. It's the most important thing is really understand what problem you're solving. Make sure it's a problem that's important enough to solve, that somebody cares enough, and that you're really going to create value, because you're not going to get paid if you don't create real value for somebody.
Manus, do you have any advice?
No, I think that's okay.
I wonder if there are any questions in the audience before we wrap up. Does anyone have any questions? Oh, wonderful. Thank you. That's terrific. Okay. Is there a challenge in consolidating, centralizing, and normalizing data originating from lot devices for analytics purposes?
From lock devices. So I'll say it sounds like it'd be easy in theory. It ends up being a lot more complicated, because I think business processes, or even just processes at home, are a lot more complex and unique by person. So it's not something like there's tables and you can just throw graphs together overnight. And certainly running this business, we're pulling things from all different sources. Just run financials, so I can pull them from my phone, but there's still all sorts of things you need to tweak to kind of get it working. So the power is there. I think we'll learn, like I said, over the next 3 to 5 years, how to do that more effectively and learn the behaviors to let computers kind of do that analysis for us. But it's not as easy as it sounds. Lisa knows. I mean, you guys are actually pulling this information and telling it to do things.
Yeah, I was thinking that I had an advisor, someone at an acquisition target who said to me, like, what is your goal for building this business and the data? Where do you see this going? And if you do see it going, if you're looking at certain companies that you're looking to be acquisition targets, understand what platform they're running on, how their applications, how their data is coming out, and see if you can build alongside that. And they've seen, acquisitions take place where like everything looks great, this business model fits in with what their company's doing, it gets almost 90% and then stops because they actually can't integrate it. And so it actually ends up being less expensive for that company to build it themselves on a platform that they're already using. And so I was like, oh my goodness, like we're at the beginning phases of what we're doing. We have the opportunity now to build this in a way that could be exciting for other people, and we could join forces. So I think if you're young enough, try to understand where you want to go with it and build it that way if you can.
This question is for Mark, although I think Mark or Lisa could answer it. In this connected world, you talked a lot about this in the transition that your company had to make in taking this product to market, but what challenges do companies like, a LiftMaster have in turning their products that are not connected into connected ones, into smart ones? What would you say, looking back on that period, was the biggest challenge besides internal resistance in the company?
Yes, that's a good question. So I think for us as a durables manufacturer, when you think about the process you use to develop new products, we would use a stage gate process or a waterfall for the software side or IT side, but we use a stage gate process, and we got really good at it. Stage gate's a really good process for managing execution risk. When you start getting in, connecting your products and start wrapping services around it, that's business model innovation. And when you're going to innovate your business model, a stage gate is probably the worst process you could use, right? It blows up on uncertainty. And so we had to learn how to do agile for our software development. We had to learn how to do lean startup to do business model innovation. So we had to layer these other processes in on top of the processes we were really good at. And I talked to a lot of other product companies that are trying to get their products connected, and they all talk about the same thing. Getting those processes right has really been a struggle. And getting the organization, you train your leadership team to think about prioritizing projects that are about execution risk. And now you ask those same leaders to be able to think about uncertainty versus execution, and to think about flexibility instead of locking down all the features and just really driving and not letting there be any change to the scope of the project or the scope of the development. You're asking people to think in multiple ways. Sometimes in the same kind of overall ecosystem, you have parts of the ecosystem you're building with StageGate and parts you're building with Agile. Your brain has to work a lot of different ways, and it's a challenge for the leadership team to lead effectively under that kind of diverse requirements situation.
Lisa, is there anything you wanted to add to that? Otherwise, I have another question for you. So it seems like we have a couple of designers who have some questions here. I'm sure we have a lot of designers in the audience, but how has IoT changed the product design process? And Mark, you talked a little bit about that just now, but what is the impact that this IoT has on the product design industry? Want to take that, Mills?
Yeah, so I'll go back to appliances. So years ago, the appliances were Whirlpool, Maytag, GE. They were essentially commoditized, right? So these are commodity products, and they are viewed that way now. LG and Samsung essentially turned them into high-tech products. It's just how good of an LCD do you have on this thing? How many buttons do you have? How cool is it? Now it's the IoT wave is making it, or you can iterate. If you do have an LCD panel, you can change the functions, you can change the buttons just by how your customer is using it. And so it is speeding up those iterations because you're taking some of the hardware out and you're making it more digital. And so you can reprogram it remotely. I'd imagine if you wanted to add features to the queue, you could do that now, maybe not overnight, because there's probably regulatory requirements that need to be tested, but a lot faster than you could just getting a new customer base, implementing it. You're taking decades off of adoption time.
So the biggest change for me as a leader, as the lead executive for innovation, was when I hired my first industrial designer. And that was the biggest change in thinking. I'm a mechanical, my background's in mechanical engineering and materials. And so when I had to understand electronics and our embedded software developers, I could understand it enough to kind of fake my way through it, and I hired good people to manage those groups for me. But when I hired my first industrial designers, it was like an eye-opening experience for me because they brought the design thinking in. And so now as we've moved forward in this connected space, as we're thinking about ecosystems, design thinking is really critical, and user experience. Traditionally, we would measure quality in our products by defective parts per million coming out of the back end of the factory. Well, now it's still that, but it's also how good is our user interface, how intuitive, how easy, how beautiful is our user interface on our app. And so industrial design and user experience experts have become really important to us, and we've grown dramatically in that area. When I talk to my peers at other durables manufacturers or product companies, the first thing I always say is get more industrial designers.
Industrial design is one of the most exciting parts, I think, of building a real hardware product. We've got these awesome circuit boards, they do really cool things, but then you get the industrial designers to come in and start doing your first 3D CADs, and it really brings your vision and your product to life, and you can start seeing how it's going to, how people are going to use it, that this actually is something that is going to be fun and a great experience. But in the process, I would say that was one of my favorite parts of building this product, was going through that phase.
Well, I think we're just about out of time, but I'd like you all to give your final thoughts and maybe some parting words of wisdom to those who are trying to build companies like yours. So Lisa, why don't you start?
Find mentors, find people that have done it, come to places like mHUB, and surround yourself with people that are in it and that can relate to you, that can support you when you're down, also help bring you up, and then once you make it, bring others along the way.
I think I'll go back to something we talked about a little earlier, which is really start at the end user and work your way back from there. Really understand what problem you're solving and how you're creating value. Make sure it matters what you're doing, and then you have permission to succeed.
Surround yourself with people that challenge you, whether it's mentors, whether it's just, people with like minds or different minds. They'll provide a perspective that'll be invaluable and will help you improve your product or take you on a different path.
It's certainly going to be an exciting industry and one to watch over the next few years. So I want to thank all of our panelists and their wonderful comments today.